praise. I know I had you guys pray for me at the beginning of the semester because I kind of stressed out over what seemed to be so daunting for the semester, and the Lord has brought me through, and it's been very productive. It's been a very blessing. And for a long period of time in there, my neck was completely pain-free. It's come back a little bit, but as far as my original fear was when it strikes me like it did at the beginning of the semester, my fear is that it would basically paralyze me, which is what it's done to me in the past. So I'm very grateful for that. I've got this bulging disc issue that has really bothered me in the past, but this semester has actually been pretty good. So thank you for your prayers, and praise to God that He helped me through that. So we're going to be we're still in the book of Acts in chapter 17 in this particular text. We have left off last week where Paul left Berea. And he's going into Athens. And one of the things that we learned about his trip to Berea was that the people were noble. They were noble in the sense that they searched the scriptures diligently. From there we have a great source text for giving us the encouragement and the ability to search the scriptures ourselves. There is a very, very important part of our faith being Baptistic in nature, that we believe that you can discover the truth through the reading of the scriptures. There, as we mentioned before, there's the two pitfalls. There's the pitfall of saying, well, I only read the Bible alone, and I don't listen to any historian. I don't trust in anything else but my personal, myopic, once in a universe perception of what I think the scriptures say. And then, of course, you get the other extreme that they say, well, we can't understand anything unless the Pope or some religious figure explains that to us. And so we hope that we can all find ourselves in a common place and in a good mediary place in between those two extremes. A lot of our faith has to do with that, doesn't it? Just balancing things. It's just easy to be unbalanced if we're not careful. But before we get into verse 16, leaving Berea and heading into Athens, let's pray. Father, I thank you for your word. Lord, I thank you for what happened in Athens. Lord, that it is no small thing that we are studying and reading about what you did, not the Apostle Paul. We're not reading about the works of people. We're reading about the workings of your Spirit through people. So, Lord, it's really the book of the Spirit of God, the book of the Spirit's work through the acts of the apostles. And I thank you for that. And I thank you, Lord, that your Spirit still works in like manner today, giving us the same testimony to the world in which we live. Father, increase that testimony, even using the book of Acts to encourage that in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so when Paul leaves Berea, verse 15, those who conducted Paul, love that verb, brought him as far as Athens. Okay, now they conducted him, Paul conducted himself. We don't really know for sure, but Athens is an incredibly important city in the history of the world. If you look at Athens, historians have dated this city to be up to 7,000 years old. It's an incredibly old city. Many would call it the oldest city on the earth. Athens, Athene was Athena was the goddess of wisdom. And so Paul is going straight to Athens, who is dedicated, the city is dedicated and named after the goddess of wisdom. Thank you so much, brother. And so this goddess of wisdom in order to really attribute to her the royalty, the honor, the glory that was due her name. They built, all of us, if we've not been there ourselves, we've seen pictures of the Parthenon. And it's just an incredibly enormous structure. Stoa all around this area. They've got this massive construction built in its royal, high, authoritative, majestic image that it has, incredibly artistic, in order to bring out their tribute to this goddess, in this case, the goddess of wisdom. And so when we hear Paul is going to Athens, this is no small thing. In fact, being probably Paul's first time, we don't know, but probably Paul's first time to Athens, not a foreigner to the culture, and we'll get to that in just a minute. He is no foreigner to Athens culture, to Greek Hellenistic culture, but possibly unfamiliar with the artistic beauty of this city. And those that have been there, I wish Lacey was here with us this morning. He's actually been there. He could attest to the fact that there are incredible details in the sculpting of these idols that were in this city. Very, very fascinating. Athens became the house for many sculptures of the famous philosophers, famous deities. The detail even of the people themselves is fascinating. They went to great artistic detail to fashion what these gods and goddesses would have looked like. Very, very impressive, artistically impressive in the city of Athena. But after receiving a command, and after receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him as soon as possible, they departed. Okay, so Paul arrives in Athens, and just to kind of give you a little bit of detail as to what happens here. Paul arrives in Athens. He's by himself. He calls Timothy and Silas to come and help him. And so they do, but when they get there to help him, he sends them back. He sends them back to Thessalonica, where there was great persecution. Every time you hear Thessalonica, the first word that should come to your mind is persecution. That church, literally, they believed that Thessalonica was the end of the world. The Christians in Thessalonica were convinced this is the eschaton. This is the end of the world. The persecution was so great to the Christian church there. It was so intense that they said, this is it. This has to be it. This has to be the end of the world that Jesus was talking about. And so he sends Timothy back, and Timothy goes straight in there, which is pretty cool of Timothy. And possibly Silas, we don't really know where he went, but later on, Paul leaves Athens, and then he gets to Corinth, and he's like, guys, y'all got to help out again in Corinth. So Paul and so Timothy and Silas, or Silvanus, sometimes Paul calls him, they go down to Corinth, and that's where Paul writes these letters to the Corinthians. So this kind of gives you a little sketch of what is going on with Paul's helpers at this point. There's not a lot that happens fruit-wise that when we're in Athens, other than the fact that there were some very high-standing believers, but no church that we know of. We don't really have an early church of Athens that was developed. But notice what happens here in verse 16. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, so he has called for these guys to help, and it's going to take a while. I mean, you just can't, you call for them, it takes a long time to sail all the way up to northern, Macedonia, and then for these guys to sail back. So Paul's just not going to sit there and twiddle his thumbs this whole time. I mean, this is a long time that they're waiting for this transaction to take place. So while he's waiting for them at Athens, notice now, impressed. You have to be impressed with the artistic skill that's in this city. The theaters, the arenas. There was massive structures. Many of them are still there. I saw some of the Roman structures in Caesarea. in Jerusalem and many of the places around there, they even tributes to Herod the Great. I mean, this is a very, very cultural city. The Idumean Herod that we have spoken of, they even have tributes to him. They have all kind of things going on in this city of Athens. Great philosophers have lived there. It's actually, Western historians have called that the birthplace of democracy, and it is. We are a democratic republic because of Cicero, because of Plato, because of these people that wrote and studied and philosophized in the city of Athens. So this is the birthplace of many, many of the cultural phenomenon that we are seeing today. And so notice though what happens to him. His spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. His spirit was provoked within him. That's a good translation. There was just this unnatural stirring that was just greatly provoked, greatly annoyed, greatly just revolting to him. And it's his spirit that he uses the same word for spirit that he does in Romans 8, this human this human side of him, his soul within him, right? His spirit within him is provoked beyond measure. Notice that it's not his eye. It's not the mental part. I mean, that had to have been impressive. It was his soul, his spirit within him. This part that's non-material is provoked within him as he saw. In fact, the philosopher Petronius, he even made a joke. He said, when you go into Athens, it's easier to find a god in Athens than it is to find a human being. It's just so many of these temples, so many of these places of worship to these deities. It's just so chock full of idolatry. And no doubt that when Paul entered this city, this is, in my opinion, a good clue that he had never been there before. This is his first time into Athens, and being his first time looking around, seeing all of the shrines, all of the deities that were hailed and honored in the city, and then of course seeing the Parthenon, which in its full glory, in its pre-earthquake splendor. I cannot imagine what this structure must have looked like, and of course so many of the other structures, from the arenas to the gymnasiums to the halls to the other, and the Parthenon it does dwarf the others, but if it weren't for the Parthenon, the others would be incredibly impressive too. So but anyway, it says that he saw that the city was full of idols, so he reasoned. Notice what he does now. He reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons. Notice it doesn't say with the Jews and with the Gentile Jews. He calls them devout persons. Probably people that were devoted to Yahweh, but had not gone through the whole process of proselytization. They had not become full-blown Jews. They were people, though, that were interested in hearing the word of the Lord and were devoted to doing what the word of the Lord said. These devout people, this kind of gives you an idea of what Athenian synagogue worship looked like. It involved it was more of a multicultural center. Remember, Athens is an incredibly multicultural community, very similar to the United States. It was sort of this magnet of many different types of cultures and societies, and they would come here to study, they would come to learn, they would come to see, to sightsee. An incredibly impressive opportunity, and many people would come to take advantage. So the synagogue itself began to represent what that culture looked like. In this case, it's a good thing, because had it not, there were people that were devout that would have never heard the word of the Lord in this synagogue. But notice where else that he ministered. It says he reasoned in the synagogue, and I forgot to mention the word reasoning. And that's a good translation of the word, reasoning. He brought rational logic to them, and he reasoned with them. And it takes great patience to reason with people, doesn't it? Not necessarily beating them over the head, not necessarily arguing, but he reasoned with them, which is a tribute to Paul's pastoral heart. As we mentioned last week, we've already seen a big part of Paul's pastoral heart. He really needed these guys in Athens with him, but because he cared so much about these brothers that he can't get out of his mind, he sends Timothy to tend to them and to care for them and to help them. And so here we see a little bit of Paul's pastoral heart too, where he with patience, with time, he reasons through the scriptures with these devout men and with the Jews. But notice there's one more place, and in the marketplace. Normally we hear Paul went to the synagogue, right? Except we get one exception where Paul did not go straight to a synagogue. Does anybody remember where that was? Galatia. Remember that was a big issue because the Galatian church is what really spurred on that first Jerusalem council. And remember, there was the whole issue of Gentiles and how do they get grafted in and what laws should they keep. And it was world changing. You know, this whole council about Gentiles. What do we do? Galatia was the big turning point in the history of, or the development of the church amongst Christian worshipers. But here we have. Notice he goes to the synagogue and the marketplace. Luke is intentionally giving these two as to speak of them happening in tandem with one another. He didn't go to the synagogue and then later to the marketplace, which is what he always did, except for Galatia. He would always go to the synagogue first, reason with them, spend several days with them, and then after some time would go into the marketplace, or in this case, only in Athens is there a place like this, which is impressive in and of itself, the agora that they went to. But anyway, and in the marketplace, notice, every day, now, with those who happen to be there. That's not the best translation to say that with those that happen to be there, because our modern day, when we hear the word happen to be there, we often understand that to mean, well, I just happened to be in this place at this time, or by chance, or peradventure, that sort of idea that they just happened to be there. No, they happened to be there. In other words, that they were, this was this is a part of what they did. The happenings of the city caused them to be there. Does that make sense? And so what were these happenings that were there? Well, the happenings were that they would discuss religious things on a daily basis. Why so much religious talk? I mean, why does everything have to be so spiritual? Why can't they discuss higher order things, things that might be a little bit more important? Well, because remember now, religion is the way you view the world. The religion, your faith, determines how you perceive the world should be governed. This is what separates us hugely from Islam. We believe that man is born into sin and he's corrupt. Islam believes man is born with the tabula rasa, where man gets corrupt later on. This is a huge difference of how we believe in legislation. When a lot of contemporary Muslims come to our country, they want more of a socialistic structure because they think we can bring the good out of people. We think we can get good to come out of people. We as Christians, we believe you can get nothing good out of people, so we're more capitalist because we want to limit what people can do. Just let greed run them and let greed take care of it, and we should be okay as long as everybody's greedy enough. The money should balance out pretty well. It plays a huge part into how we perceive the world, the way that we worship. And so they actually had a council of people in this particular city. They would, ironically, they would go to the hill of war, and they would counsel. They had this council at the Areopagus, the hill of Eris, the warrior. And so they would have this council that would discuss the religious things of the day. And so the happenings of the city allowed them, namely in this case, the Epicureans and the Stoics. Now the Stoics were these were the adversaries of the Epicureans. Epicurus lived, in about 307 is where he did most of his writing, BC. Okay, not AD, BC, and Epicurus has a pretty. It's very interesting how this man has influenced the classical and Hellenistic culture. Epicurus was a philosopher that basically said he's very Eastern, and students of R.C. Sproul, you guys can probably explain even a little bit more, so let me know if I need further explanation of who he was. But Epicurus, what he stated, or what he believed, was that man needed to pursue, it was a form of hedonism. Man needed to pursue his own pleasure. That we should seek pleasure to ourselves. That is the purpose of why we live. And so it's very hedonistic. But this was the catch. The way that you pursue this pleasure is through modest pursuits, and pursuits of only the things that can be satisfied. Okay? Therefore, things like we know, lust can never be satisfied. Promiscuity, never be, adultering lifestyles, these types of things that greed, that you can never satisfy. Love for money, love for or more like illicit pleasures, these types of things, you should go to great lengths to prevent yourselves from pursuing these pleasures, so that you can actually focus yourself on pleasures that can be fulfilled. Okay? Very, very similar to Buddhism. If you are familiar with the Eastern Buddhistic types of things, meditation, modest living apart from too much of just what the earth can render, and modestly settling your hearts to pursue the things that are most satisfying, like meditation, like peaceful homes, things of that nature. Very, very Buddhistic in its form. I have a few theories, by the way, of how Hellenistic culture was developed, and one of them being that Hellenism was very Eastern. They depended heavily on Eastern thought when it developed, and thus became Western thought. But anyway, I don't want to bore you with all that. It can get really boring fast, so we better watch out. So anyway, this guy Epicurus, when you hear people speak of someone being Epicurean in nature, it was just that. They did not believe, very, very, very staunchly, they did not believe in a deity. If there was a deity, they were deists, okay? They believed that there was a higher being, but this higher being it has a very distant relationship. It has nothing to do with mankind. There is no possible way God could come to the earth and have any interminglings with man's stuff, okay? That's Epicurean. There's no possible way. Why? Well, the very famous line, in fact, David Hume himself quoted Epicurus when he said, okay, you can only have one of two things. Epicurus was the one that said, if God exists, then he can only be one of two things. He either is unempowered, he doesn't have the power to rid the earth of evil, which would make him no God at all, or he's a God that doesn't care that evil abides on the earth, which would make him an evil God. So he's either powerless or evil. That was his rationale as to why David Hume adopted the same thing. Many people today have adopted that same line of logic, that people have followed in his feet. So anyway, So some of the Epicureans and the Stoic philosophers. Now, just to kind of give you an idea, Epicureans believe that we should have nothing to do with politics, okay? A lot of Christians follow the Epicurean mindset. Don't vote, don't do anything because it's all going to just go to hell anyway. That's sort of their mindset. It's all of that stuff. Those are the pleasures that will not be satisfiable. Therefore, just let all of that just burn, right? The Stoics, however, were very involved politically. They were much of the opposite tendency. Anyway, some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some said, what does this babbler wish to say? This sperma legos. Sperma legos means the seed picker, like a chicken that goes around and picking on seeds, and it's a babbler. He just goes and grabs all this stuff and just spits it right back out. What is this babbler? What does this sperma legos guy have to say? And they said, others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities. Because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. Foreign divinities because they have, some mythological deities that speak of resurrection. Obviously, many of them do. These foreign deities. But then preaching Jesus, who was man and God's Son, the Son of God, 100% man, 100% God. This is definitely a foreign deity because we've never heard of such a thing. A lot of Egyptians kind of have this resurrection motif, and so maybe that has something to do with it. Remember, they're very cultural. Okay, so they're starting to question him and talk to him. Verse 19, and they took him and brought him to the Areopagus. Okay, like I said, this is where the council would officially be and consistently talk about these things. In the Areopagus now, meeting with this council of religious thinkers, they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. So, wow, what an open door. Remember, he's by himself now, okay? 1 Thessalonians 3, he actually tells the Thessalonians, look, I was by myself in Athens, all right? I loved you guys, in other words, right? I really care about you guys. I was in Athens by myself. So don't ever doubt how much I love you guys. I sent my main guys to be with you. I was in Athens alone. And so here's Paul by himself. He's saying, with this incredibly open door, verse 21, now all of the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there, remember, cultural center, foreigners came, they all talked and philosophized together. The foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. They devoted themselves to this. When I was in Jerusalem, you see the Hasidic Jews in fact, I tried to chase a few of them while I was there just to see how fast they walked, and they would get annoyed, because I walk right behind them. They're walking this fast, going from place to place, and the reason being is that they're having to walk place to place because they believe it's a waste of God's time if they were to take too long walking to get to the place of meditation or the place of study in the Torah, and so they would walk quickly in order to not waste God's time. All of these Hasidic Jews are just walking all over Jerusalem, and they're all supported by the government. The guy's just sucking all the money out of the government. They're taking all the taxpayers' money. A lot of taxpayers are irritated with these guys because they do nothing but sit around and study the law. And they don't have jobs. They have cell phones. They have really nice cell phones. But they don't have jobs. Their job is to sit around and study the law. And that's similar to what this council looked like too. In the Areopagus, they would gather, they would talk about these things all day. Okay, so they would discuss the religious orders, probably being cared for by the taxpayers as well. So anyway, verse 22. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you guys are very, very religious." Okay? It's a term that Paul is being very diplomatic. You guys are really religious. Okay? That could be taken in a couple ways, but Paul's trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here. "For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription: to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you." There's writings, actually. There was a writer 50 years from the time that Paul was here. He writes about not just one, but multiple altars that are dedicated to the unknown God. Later on in subsequent years, that they've unearthed and discovered many altars all throughout the Attica region that are called altars to the unknown God. And so Paul is bringing this to their attention. He doesn't have to be. And he uses this to dovetail into what exactly the gospel is all about. This is enormously important. This classical city, this city that's the oldest city on the earth, this place, this is the birthplace of the cradle of Western civilization, the place that is going to change the entire earth. It doesn't have to be like this, guys. It doesn't have to be an unknown God. I will proclaim this thing, this demonstrative pronoun he uses, this thing. It's as though he's saying, you guys have this altar that's to an unknown God. This is it. This is the thing I'm going to proclaim to you. And so they've all gathered here. Listen, let us hear what you have to say, because it seems as though it's some foreign deity that you want to bring to our attention. Well, let me tell you about this foreign deity, guys. This altar that you guys have built, you have multiple ones all over this city, all over this region, all over this known world. This very God that you guys have been trying to worship, I'm going to make it so you can worship him now. Isn't that cool? So this is him. This is him, the creator of the world, the glorious one that makes everything. This is the God I'm going to proclaim to you. And notice what he says. "The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man." Folks, he's right in front of the Parthenon. This is bold. This is no joke here. Paul has an unnatural boldness. Everywhere Paul went, he was threatened to be killed because he offended the deities. He is standing in front of the goddess temple, the Parthenon. To this day is one of the greatest structures in the history of civilization. He stands in front of the Parthenon. He possibly even points at Athena's place of worship and says, "This God is not worshipped with hands. He's not served by human hands. This has nothing to do with true worship." As though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind. He does not take from mankind. He's the one that's benevolent. He's the one giving. You guys have got it all wrong, Epicureans, Stoics. You guys think whether it's through your policies, whether you guys think it's through your philosophies, you guys somehow have managed to think you can give something to him, create these places of worship that are great and gets the world's attention. You think that brings him pleasure? No, he's not served with that. What he gets pleasure from is giving. He gives. He's like a good father. And why do we have Christmas anyway? Why do we do this kind of stuff? It's cool to watch our kids get excited over gifts. I'm not gonna lie. I guess there is a part of me that I like for them to be happy with the gift, but I like it too. It's great. It's fun to give to my children. It's fun to dote on them. It's fun to make the smile come to their face and surprise them with things. By the way, that's why I never buy them anything if they beg me, because I don't ever want them to think they did it. I don't want their begging to be the product of me buying them something. No, I want it to be my benevolence. I want it to be from my own heart. I'm doting on my child. I'm letting them know how special they are, because I like that. And they like it too. It's this very unreal, unearthly sort of sense of this reciprocal pleasure, and it's great. That's what he's saying God's like. He's not sitting up in heaven waiting for you to make some big structure for him. He's not seeing how much you can accomplish for him. He's seeing who he can lavish his grace upon. By the grace of Jesus Christ, when he died on the cross, he led captivity captive and gives gifts to men. He glorifies his Son through his church, and he continues to lavish upon them gift after gift to show that he's great and he's worthy of worship. You see where he's going? And so everything he gives, verse 26, and he made from one man every nation of kingdom to live on all the face of the earth. Definitely non-Athenan Adam and Eve. Are you kidding me? Come on, man. Paul, please. But Paul has to start there, and as we do as well. You have to start with Adam. You have to. The minute you take Adam out of the equation, you take the whole reason Jesus died out of the equation. Having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, notice that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and perhaps find him. Remember I was talking about classical Greek last week, and classical Greek employs some grammatical concepts that the biblical Greek just does not have. The biblical Greek is the sort of the ordinary man Greek, okay? Classical Greek was much more complex. The average Greek writer probably, in a lot of ways, that could not have even read the Ciceros and the Platos of his time, because they were just in a really advanced Greek. One of the things that the Greek language had classically was this thing called the optative mood. Mood, we don't really use mood a lot. Fiddler on a Roof, you heard if I were a rich man. The reason we use the word were is because of a thing called the subjunctive mood. Subjunctive mood is called a mood of possibility. The optative mood is the mood of plausibility, but not going to happen. Okay, so they had this whole grammatical structure in order to say verbs of things that could potentially but never happen. These are the two verbs in I think the entire New Testament. There might be one more elsewhere. Luke certainly would have used it if there was. But Paul the Apostle is using this. This shows you the classical mind that Paul had. Paul uses the optative mood here, a classical grammatical structure of verbs here, in order to show them that you might strive for and that you might go groping about it, you might find God. In other words, all of this working that you guys are doing, all this stuff that's, quote, serving him with your hands, all this groping about to try to find who he is, it's never going to happen, guys. It's never going to happen. How is the only way it's going to happen? It's through revelation. This unknown God, how does that revelation come? Through the preaching of his word. Who's a preacher of his word? I am. I'm telling you right now who this God is. No more needing to grope around. No more needing to perchance find him. He's here. And so this is where it gets interesting. That they should seek God. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. In him we live and move and have our being. This particular philosopher, and names escape